What's up guys, Mr. Who's the Boss here, and in front of you right now we have the most interesting phone I've seen this year so far. This is the UMi Z, and it's got the potential to redefine the mid-range smartphone market. So just before we start my full review, I'll actually be giving another one of these smartphones away, so be sure to subscribe and then follow me on Twitter. I'll announce the winners there. So anyway, this is the UMi Z, and you know a company means business when the smartphone comes with 3 different cases and a tempered glass screen protector. The packaging and presentation was honestly phenomenal. It felt like I paid £400 to £500 for the smartphone, whereas in actuality, you can get this for as little as $220. One of the first things that struck me when I took it out the box was just how ergonomic it is. Now, generally with Chinese flagships, they tend to sort of cram all the components they can in there to try and really make the spec sheet stand out, and they sacrifice on design. But with the UMi Z, the company has taken a slightly different approach. They use something the company calls dual 3D design, essentially meaning the edges are curved on both the front and the back of the phone, and it palms extremely well. Not only that, but it's got a very good weight to it, well balanced as well. It doesn't feel like it's going to flip over anytime soon. And the materials are super high quality. It doesn't attract too many fingerprints, feels premium, and at the same time can also withstand a good drop or two. At 8.2mm, it's hardly the thinnest phone out there, but the curviness of it really does make it a pleasure to hold still. At some points while using the phone, it kind of reminded me of a rounded pebble, in a good way. So the reason the UMi Z is such an interesting phone is that for sub $250, it probably has the most impressive specifications on paper in the entire world. And that doesn't stop with the camera. We've got a 13MP Samsung sensor, capable of 4K video and backed up by phase detection autofocus, laser autofocus and a quad LED flash. And the results are marvelous. Side by side, even with my Google Pixel smartphone, and in some photos you really can't tell much difference. It captures a lot of detail, almost pushing those 13MP to the max. It's got rich colours, deep contrast, and it's even got some fancy little filters built into the camera app, which, while subtle, can actually add quite a nice effect to your photos. It's got a decent amount of depth of field, nothing outstanding, but also the camera app itself was honestly quite impressive. Everything was very fast thanks to the new chipset, which I'll get onto in just a second, and it's also got a very extensive Pro mode. Funnily enough, we've also got a front-facing flash, which is a rather unusual addition for smartphones these days. And combine that with the front-facing 13MP camera, and whilst not quite as good as the rear, the front-facing photos are fantastic too. So in terms of software, right now at least, we've got Android 6.0. The company has promised an OTA update to 7.0, but it hasn't released yet, and I can't really comment on how that's going to be. But for now, the OS generally speaking is pretty good. It's pretty low on bloatware, runs really fast, but every now and again you can't help but feel like the OS has been a little bit rushed. Sometimes text will overlap, or you'll see an icon that's a little bit out of place. And one very confusing omission is the lack of capacitive keys on the bottom bar. There's just none, so if you actually want to hit the back button, you either have to navigate to the top corner of the screen, or you have to swipe up for your navigation bar, hit the back button, and then swipe down to disable it again. It seems very arduous. Now the screen for the most part is good. It's not the brightest display out there, but even in most outdoor conditions it should do you fine. Now you'll probably notice whilst the colours are great, it's not the best in terms of contrast. Blacks could be a little bit deeper, and you will be able to tell the difference between this and maybe a Samsung display. Something I can vouch for though is the Dragon Trail glass that this thing is using. It's very slick to the touch, it has a nice texture to it, and it's also very resistant to scratches. Unfortunately, there is still a bit of a bezel on this guy, which makes it feel like more of an iterative improvement rather than the next step forward. Under the hood though, things get even more interesting. We've got 4GB of RAM, which is great in itself, but also the Helio X27 CPU, and this is the first phone in the entire world to use it. It's the fastest mobile 10-core CPU you can get right now, and it's also backed up by a fairly beefy GPU. It scores great in benchmarks. I mean, nearly 110,000 is really up there with smartphones that do cost a lot more than this. But having said that, it just doesn't always translate into incredible gaming experiences like you would hope. Even though it does in theory and on paper perform very well, in actual day-to-day use in terms of games, in terms of UI, it's good, but it's not fantastic. Even on Real Racing 3, an Android game that's more than 3 years old now, every now and again when you turn a corner, it'll just drop a few frames, and it just takes away from what could have been an amazing experience. The UMi Z is very strong when it comes to battery. We've got 3780mAh of battery capacity, which means that after a full charge, you're looking at 2 full days of usage. On top of that, you can get to nearly 50% with just 40 minutes of charging with its own proprietary fast charge technology. Not too bad. The speaker is nothing to run home about. It's not terrible, it reaches a decent volume, but it lacks bass, so it doesn't really do justice to vocals or voices when you're watching TV and films. I didn't really have any problems with the front-facing fingerprint scanner. Whilst I do prefer rear placement, it still works very fast on this one and is extremely secure as you'd expect. And as an icing on the cake, as well as the 32 gigs of inbuilt storage, we've got room for 256 more by a micro SD card. So guys, there you have it, that's the UMi Z, and I have to say this is one of the longest reviews I've done just because it's such an interesting smartphone. Whilst on paper it's extremely impressive, the company is clearly innovating in new ways. It's trying to push the boundaries of what we can expect from a mid-range flagship, and whilst it doesn't quite achieve the upper echelons of what we might expect based on its specifications, for the price at least it's still a very impressive smartphone and should be commended. The camera's fantastic, battery amazing, screen's pretty good too, and the performance shouldn't be underestimated. So guys, that's it from me for now. I really appreciate you watching, and don't forget to subscribe and follow me on Twitter to enter the giveaway for the smartphone. With that being said, I'm Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'm signing out.